Great. Well, thank you so much, Jane. It's great to be with you guys. I wonder if I could begin this morning by just telling you about a funny thing that happened to me. On the 7th of September, 1987, I was so excited I could not sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling all night, so excited because I knew the following morning, I'd be going to Heathrow Airport. I would be flying to the USA, and I was going to live there on my own for a year. I was going to be a senior in high school at Kentucky Country Day School, Louisville, Kentucky. Now, as you know, the epicenter of American high school life is the American football team. The Friday night lights, yeah? The marching bands. We had our own marching band. We had our own stadium. There were thousands of people that came. And I was excited about playing American football in front of all these people. Now, I grant you folks that I had never actually played American football before, but I thought, well, there can't be much to it because I had previously played rugby 3 times a week, every week for 10 years. So I thought, well, rugby is a contact sport, but in rugby you don't have any of those ridiculous pads, you don't have any of the protection, you just like hit people. But in American football, as you know, they have this absurd paraphernalia, these huge shoulder pads, pads all over your body, and they even wear these motorcycle helmets, which were obviously completely unnecessary. So I knew that I'd probably be more than able, but I did nevertheless, on that first day at practice, I did dress up. And I wanted to kind of look the part, I wanted to sort of fit in. And so that's not actually the right photo, but I'll just go back, if I can, in a moment. So there we are. So there I was on the sideline, first day at practice. And I was standing on the sideline, and the coach, Coach Monaco, called over, "Yo, Limey, get with the program," which translated means, "Oh, you British fellow, come and line up here with these other motorcycle helmeted young men." So I joined the end of what Coach Monaco described as the line of scrimmage. And Coach Monaco told me that from here on, I was going to be a defensive end. Yeah. So he explained to me it was really very simple. All I had to do was, when the ball moved, to run as fast as I could towards the ball. The ball was going to be in the hands of the quarterback, and all I had to do was knock the ball out of his hands before he threw the ball. Well, I thought, well, he's only 5 or 6 yards away. This isn't going to be very hard. I mean, I'm here. I've got my natural speed and agility, honed over years of practice. He's only there. This is not going to be too difficult. And so I was ready to go. And so I'm there on the line of scrimmage, and the ball moves, and off I go. And I'm only get about halfway there. Already the ball's gone. So I thought, well, maybe there is going to be a little bit more to this than meets the eye. But I thought, no problem, second down. So second down, same thing, off I go. But again, the ball's gone before I get there. On the third down, I actually brush the non-throwing arm of Carter Payne, the starting quarterback. So as he's releasing the ball, I'm there. So that's only that far away. I've only played this game for 2 minutes already. I'm that close to sacking the quarterback. And so I go back to the line of scrimmage for that fourth down, and I think, Carter Payne, on this next down, you are going to experience the land of hope and glory and the mother of the free. You are going to experience the full force of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland any second now. So I'm totally in the zone, as they would say at this point. So on that fourth down, as I looked up, everything felt different. Carter Payne was looking straight at me. And before I realized, previous 3 downs, he'd been looking to the other side of the field. And I could see out the corner of my left eye, out of my peripheral vision, this blue, shirted, large, moving object. And I had that sort of foreboding sense of doom. Do you ever know that feeling in life when you feel that something really bad is about to happen to you? But you don't know exactly what it is, but you just know that something bad is going to happen. And I thought it's probably something to do with the large, blue-shirted, moving object that's coming close to me. And so the next thing I knew, ladies and gentlemen, I was flat on my back. And I had a pain in the back of my head where my head had hit my helmet, had hit the ground. And I was flat out, but I couldn't see the sun. I couldn't see the sky. Why? Because an offensive tackle called Clay Heislop was standing over me going, "Huh!" And I thought to myself, I kind of felt like the stuffing had been kind of knocked out of me, that all of my surging self-confidence had all been knocked out of me, and I felt like my pride had been bruised. And as we meet our hero, something like that has happened to him. This is something that we didn't get to last time. There are 2 accounts in the Bible of the story of Moses, and we failed to look at any of the New Testament story last time. This is the story of Moses told by one of the leaders of the early Christian church, Stephen. Just before Stephen became the first martyr of the Christian church, he told the story of Moses, and this is what he said. At that time, Moses was born, and he was no ordinary child. For 3 months, he was cared for by his family. When he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him. Now, that does admittedly sound rather alarming, don't you think? And brought him up as her own son. Oh, my goodness. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. So on first glance, this sounds like one of those awful news stories you sometimes hear from the hospital, you know, where you leave your baby in the corridor, and then some random person turns up and steals your baby and then adopts him and brings him up as their own. But actually, what's happened here is that Moses' mother, Jochebed, has become aware of this terrible news that there's this edict that all the Hebrew boys are all going to get killed. And she's come up with a rather ingenious plan that if she can get her boy, Moses, adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, well, Moses will be safe within the household of the princess. And that's exactly what happens. That's how it works out. And folks, this is like a preview, don't you think, of what actually happens subsequently, hundreds of years later, to Jesus. Because Jesus was another Hebrew boy, and once again, the king, in this case, King Herod, has issued a decree that all the Hebrew baby boys in Bethlehem should all be killed. But God intervenes, and Jesus is preserved. How? Same as Moses. He goes down into Egypt. And you might wonder, well, why did God intervene? What was so important that Jesus was going to do that it was worth preserving him? What was so valuable? What was so important? It was you. It was you. Jesus was preserved as an infant from that terrible fate so that he could connect with you, so that he could reach you, so that he could rescue you, so that through him you would be able to meet God. I wonder how much time we spend thinking about the fact that we are alive. And that God has actually arranged things in such a way so that you could be breathing now. And if you are breathing now, it is because God has a plan for you. That's how come you're still alive. If you're breathing, it's because God's got something for you. God loves you and has a plan for your life. In the 1920s, there was a pharmacist in North London called Arthur Lacey. And he owned a chain of pharmaceutical stores. And he had a wife and 7 kids. And he saw an advert in the newspaper, like so many people at the time, saying that there was a free boat passage to emigrate to Australia. Now, he's got 7 kids living in central London. He thinks, let's go to Australia. More space, more opportunity. What a great opportunity. So he moves his wife and kids. They get on the boat, free boat, all the way to Australia. And they live there for 2 years. But he sold all his businesses in London, but it doesn't work out in Australia. So after 2 years, the business doesn't take off. Wife and kids get back on the boat, back to London. And one of his 7 daughters was Mary Lacey. And back in London, Mary Lacey married Charles Burton, and they had 3 children, the eldest of whom was Angela Burton. And Angela Burton is my mother. So let's just think about this. If the pharmaceutical business had worked out in Australia, Mary Lacey would have grown up in Australia and become an Australian citizen, and she would never have met Charles Burton, who's living on the other side of the world, and therefore Angela Burton would never exist. Therefore, I would never have existed, so I wouldn't be speaking to you now, you wouldn't be listening to me because I wouldn't exist. There are things like this that God has done so that you can be alive living today. God has organized things in such a way because he always wanted you to exist so that you could be breathing, so that you could meet God. When I was a student, I had a small red Volkswagen Polo. And one time I was overtaking a lorry uphill, and I've subsequently discovered that that's not a good idea. You're not actually supposed to do that. But I didn't know that at the time. And so it was one of those times, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, where you go foot to the floor and you are overtaking, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of actual overtaking going on. It seems like you're kind of like in parallel with the lorry. There's not actually much overtaking. And the issue I had was that there was a lorry coming the opposite way, heading straight towards me. I'm on the wrong side of the road. And I'm looking at a full-on, head-on collision with this lorry. I haven't overtaken the lorry on my left. I've got the lorry straight in front of me. And so I think, well, I really don't want the head-on collision, because I'm in the Polo, he's in the lorry, I'm going to lose. And I haven't overtaken the lorry, so I just think, well, all I can do is like left hand down and hope. Left hand down. I'm waiting for the shunt from the back. I'm waiting for the lights to go out. It didn't happen. I mean, I still don't know now how it didn't happen, but I am, as you can see, I'm still here. I don't know how I'm still here. Have you had a close shave like that? Or maybe you actually have had a close shave like that. It's just that you don't know about it. But you know that you're here. There's a reason why you're still alive. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. When he was 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. He saw one of them being ill-treated by an Egyptian, so he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. So we see here in this verse what Moses' motivation was. Moses wanted to jumpstart a rebellion on behalf of his own people against the Egyptian slave owners, the oppressors. But Moses here makes a mistake that's actually the biggest mistake that I've made. Or let's put it a different way. This is the mistake, folks, that I've made this mistake most often and most consistently all through my life. The mistake is to be so focused on the task, the burning sense of injustice. I mean, after all, the Hebrew people were enslaved unjustly by these slave masters. They really were whips. It was awful. Moses is so focused on the task, and then the solution? Well, Moses thinks I'm the solution. I mean, after all, I've got the education. I've got the connections. I'm the Pharaoh's I'm in Pharaoh's household. The princess is looking after me. He's God's man of power for the hour. He's in the right place at the right time. 2 + 2 = 4. I'm ready to liberate my people. What else is there to discuss, Moses thinks? well, actually, there is something Moses has overlooked. And it's that God is actually interested in the development of a godly character in Moses' heart. The big mistake I've made is to overlook that as if, well, I mean, that's sort of irrelevant to the task. You got the task, you got the solution. Me, I mean, what's not to like? Problem, solution, let's go, God. No, Adrian. No, Moses has failed to see that God was interested. That the problem is, Moses actually does commit a murder here, indicative of a character defect, wouldn't you say? God hasn't told him to do this. I wonder whether you've tried to do something for God and it hasn't worked out. Disappointing, yeah? That's what happened to Moses. Maybe if it had worked out and that ministry had succeeded and you were leading all these people, you wouldn't have been ready to lead them at the age of 40 or whatever age it was when you tried. When it does eventually come around, Moses is ready. And he becomes one of the greatest leaders in human history because he has a godly character by then. But here, no, Moses is in a hurry. Folks, do we ever think about what would have happened if Moses had succeeded? I mean, if Moses had succeeded here, then if he'd managed somehow to broker a release for these slaves, if he'd gone to Pharaoh and managed to negotiate exit visas for all the Hebrew slaves to make a sort of a camp elsewhere, if he as a prince had managed to use his contacts in the palace to negotiate visas, then there would never have been the Passover. There would never have been the shedding of blood. There would never have been the Red Sea and all that malarkey. And therefore, there would never have been a Passover celebration, remembering the first Passover in Jerusalem. So Jesus would never have gone to Jerusalem at that Passover because there wasn't a Passover to celebrate. So Jesus would never have died on the cross. So his blood would never have been shed, and you wouldn't be forgiven, and I wouldn't be forgiven of our sins. Sometimes there's a reason why it doesn't work out, because God's got something better planned for you. Men, you are brothers. Why do you want to hurt each other? But the man who was ill-treating the other pushed Moses aside and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us?" That man spoke more truly than he knew. God hadn't yet made Moses ruler and judge. "Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. This next verse is awesome. It's like I've made it into a cliffhanger on the screen. After 40 years had passed. I mean, can you imagine that? 40 years. What's happening? During these 40 long years, Moses is tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. What's he doing? He's leading them to the far side of the wilderness. This is what he did for 40 years. Now let's just imagine, we last saw him age 40. Now let's imagine it's going to be his 80th birthday tomorrow. Yeah? So he's 79. Tomorrow is going to be 80. And there he is on the far side of the wilderness, in the backside of nowhere. And as he's standing there, imagine one of Moses' old university buddies comes along. Back from Sun Temple University. Back in Memphis or Thebes or wherever it was. And he's coming along on his camel back from some foreign trip. And this guy, Moses' buddy, he just can't believe what he's seeing. He says, "Moses, is that you?" And Moses is like, "Yeah, I mean, it must be 60 years since we've last seen each other. How are you doing?" "Oh, great. I mean, I've got kids and grandkids, and I've even got one great-grandkid." "Moses, what are you doing out here, Moses, in the middle of nowhere?" "Oh," says Moses, "I live here." "You live here? I didn't think anybody lived here. What are you doing out here, Moses?" And Moses, "Well, I mean, I'm a shepherd. I've got these sheep." "Oh, you own some sheep?" "Well, no, I don't actually own them. They're somebody else's sheep. They're actually Jethro's sheep, so I kind of just look after them." Moses, I've got to say that back when I last saw you, Moses, you were top of economics. You were top of astronomy. You were top in agriculture. You were top in hieroglyphics. You were top in literature. Moses, now, can you imagine the sinking feeling? Folks, the very next day, Moses meets God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it didn't burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush doesn't burn up. Now, this is a fascinating situation because, if you like, this is a picture of a typical Christian adult conversion. What do I mean? Well, first of all, you're not in the palace. You're not doing what you thought you'd be doing in life. You're out in the wilderness. So it feels like your life's on a detour. Lots of people become Christians when life hasn't worked out the way that you thought it would. You're not in the palace. That's how I was brought up. I was the Prince of Egypt. You're actually over here in the wilderness thinking, what on earth's going on? Everything's gone wrong. But if you had still been in the palace, you would not have seen the burning bush and met God, because the burning bush is out in the wilderness. So lots of Christian conversions happen out here, and there's another way in which this is typical of Christian conversion. Moses sees something that's real with his own eyes, indisputably real, that does not fit with his worldview. You see, every bush that Moses has seen over the past 40 years that's been on fire, all of them have had a fuel, had a source, something that's making them burn. As he looks at this particular one, the bush isn't burning up. So how can that be? What's happening is all of his past experience has led him to believe that there always has to be fuel for the fire. There's no fuel for this fire. How can that be? And he looks closer. Folks, that's what happened to me. There I was, Warple Road, London SW19, with 20 of my friends standing around in a circle, and one of our number, Caroline Payne, invited all of us to come to her church. 2 days later, it was Friday night, she invited us to come to the 6:30 p.m. evening service at her church. And she invited us in a kind of a matter-of-fact kind of a way, as if it was no big deal. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't kind of looking at her shoes. And the thing was, she clearly thought that if we came, she really thought that we'd enjoy it. Well, it was real. I mean, she's really there. She's really saying this stuff. But it was so strange. Why aren't you embarrassed to admit? None of us went to church. Why aren't you embarrassed to admit this? Why would you ever think that we would enjoy it? I mean, obviously we won't enjoy it. Church is irrelevant. It's boring. And so we did what Moses did. We didn't commit to anything. We just went and had a look. Moses isn't committed to anything. All he's doing is seeing something that doesn't fit his worldview and going to investigate because it's strange. That's what we did. We went along. It's all a bit strange. Church, like who's ever heard of that? We had a little look. That was my first experience of Bible-believing Christianity. And actually, even the fire itself is indicative of the nature of God. How so? Well, this bush, this fire, had no fuel. It kind of existed in and of itself. God exists in and of himself. God is uncreated. God does not need any fuel to promote or cause his own existence. He's uncaused. This is what the theologians call the aseity of God, that God exists in and of himself. When the Lord saw that he'd gone over to look, Moses called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Folks, I don't know what experiences you've had in life. Maybe you've had, food, fun, friends, love, maybe success, maybe job, maybe some sort of satisfaction through all of those things, maybe some amazing mountaintop experiences. By definition, there cannot be any experience greater than you meeting God. I mean, we're not talking about a bungee jump off a mountain. We're talking about meeting the person who made the mountain. We're not talking about going on a cruise on the ocean. We're talking about meeting the person that made the water. We're not talking about looking at some amazing photographs from a telescope out of space. We're talking about the person who made the stars. You can meet the creator of the universe. This is what it's all about. This story is about a human being actually meeting God. That's why Jesus came. That's why you're still alive, so that you can meet God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I've seen the way the Egyptians are pressing them. So now go! I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And I don't know about you, but when I read this, I think to myself, great, wonderful, why did it take you so long to answer the phone, God? These people have been pressing redial for 430 years. They have been crying out, oh God, there are these Egyptians, and they keep oppressing us and whipping us, and they've enslaved us. Come and help. Engaged, redial. Oh God, it's another year later, and they're still... Why did it take God... I mean, it is great that he finally picks up and does something about it, don't you think? Yeah? But why does it take him 400... I mean, the answer is, folks, that at the start of the book of Exodus in chapter 1, verse 1, there are only 70 of them. 430 years before, there's a family of 70 Hebrews. It's taken 430 years for them to become numerous enough to become a nation so that they can become God's missionary nation to showcase the God of Israel to the whole world. Now, a family couldn't do that. 70 people can't change the world, but a nation can. God wants to show the whole world how great he is, and he's chosen to develop this nation from 70 to 430 to thousands and thousands, but it's taken 430 years to do it. That's why it's taken so long. So finally, Moses hears what he wanted to hear 40 years before, but look at his reaction. Moses said to God, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Do you see the difference? 40 years before, God, I'm surprised it's taken you as long as 10 minutes to notice. I'm your man of power for the hour. I'm so well connected. You may know that I'm actually part of Pharaoh's household. I'm ready. I'm able. I've got all these connections. I'm terribly well educated. I'm ready. No, you're not ready. 40 years of adversity, 40 years of being flat on your back, knocked out in the wilderness, has made Moses ready, because now he's empty of self-confidence. What's God going to put in that self-confidence? I will be with you, verse 12. Friend, that's what's been happening to you. Why is this going on so long? Why have I been in the spiritual wilderness? Why has my life been so hard? What's this adversity all about? What possible reason could there be for all this tough stuff that's happened to me? God's in a process of emptying Moses out of the self-confidence so that God can pour himself in. Why? Because there's a task. There's something that Moses is going to do in the world. There's a whole nation enslaved. He's got to get them out. This is a major leadership thing that he's got to do. And now, in verse 12, he's ready. And God says to Moses what he says to you this morning. I will be with you. I don't know what you're going into tomorrow morning. I don't know what horrors might await you God says, I will be with you. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? Who shall I say is calling? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Another way of translating the Hebrew is being itself. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. Being itself has sent me to you. So here we discover God's name. I am who I am. And you say, well, that doesn't make any grammatical sense. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to make theological sense. I am who I am is a God who has no beginning. I am who I am is a God who has no end. I am who I am is the God who really exists. This is so important because you see, this is not, I am whoever you want me to be. This isn't God saying, I am whoever you invent for yourself as your God, Adrian, that's who I am. This isn't, Adrian, the God of your invention, the God of your imagination. Do you know why? Because the God of my invention, the God I'd invent for myself, that God would never say to me, Adrian, right now, you need to go back into that room and you need to apologize to her because you were selfish and you were in the wrong. You need to apologize in front of everybody else so they all hear it. The God I'd invent for myself would never tell me to do that. The God I'd invent for myself would never say, Adrian, you're selfish, you're in the wrong. You've embarrassed yourself. You need to admit your mistake. The God of my invention would never do that. The God of my invention would tell me, Adrian, boys will be boys. You were provoked. It was all understandable. You were in the right. It was understandable what you did. The God I'd invent for myself, the God I'm looking for, is not the holy God of Exodus chapter 3. The God I'd invent for myself is not as holy as the real God is. The God I'd invent for myself would never point out my faults. The God who really exists says, it's time to take off your shoes because I am holy and this is holy ground. Maybe the band would like to come and join me. And as they do, I want to ask a question. How come, when we think about the holiness of God, how come it's the case that Moses survived this meeting with God at all? I mean, we've said that God is holy, without beginning, without end. Moses is a murderer. I've done many things wrong myself. How is Moses able to survive this encounter? And the answer actually is all the way back in verse 2. Because in verse 2, do you notice that it's the angel of the Lord who appeared to Moses in the flames? But every subsequent reference says God. It's God who's speaking to Moses. And so the theologians say what's happening here is that this is not any old angel. There are many angels in the Bible. There's the angel Gabriel. Do you remember? Angel Gabriel goes to announce the birth of Jesus to Mary. That's an angel. It's not the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord, whenever he appears, the commentators say that's the second person of the Trinity. This is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. And what is absolutely awesome is to look at verse 6 and know that in Matthew chapter 22, Jesus quotes verse 6. And he doesn't just quote verse 6 because he'd read it in the Old Testament. He quoted verse 6 because he was there. Jesus was there. Jesus was there. And so how come Moses survives this encounter with a holy God? Same way you do, same way I do. Because Jesus is in between the holiness of God and sinful man, like Adrian Holloway, for example. Jesus is there taking the punishment for my sin, for your sin, if you trust in him. So that instead of you being burnt up by the holiness of God, Jesus takes the hit. Jesus absorbs all the punishment for my sin and your sin. Jesus is the one who takes the holiness and the wrath of God. He absorbs that so that you can be free, so that you can know God. That's how great Jesus is. Let's just stand together, shall we? You know, I said to you earlier about that first ever trip to church. And 4 months after that first ever trip to church, I sat in the back of a car and I opened the New Testament for the first time. And The main thing that hit me was how much Jesus talked about himself. That was a big surprise. But there was one moment I remember clearly. It was in John chapter 8. Jesus is having a row with his opponents. And he says to them, before Abraham was, I am. And that, you and I, maybe you've met Hindus who'd claim pre-existence. People like you and me who would claim, yeah, this isn't my first existence. I've existed before in a previous life, yeah? But I've never met a Hindu who claims to also be the creator of the universe. When Jesus said, before Abraham was born, I am, he was claiming to be that that amazing God who's uncreated. I am who I am. And that's why the Jews who heard him say it tried to kill him there and then, because they understood this guy is claiming to be the God of the Bible, the God who created the universe. I am who I am. That's who we're coming to. That's who we're coming to. Let's come to him right now. Let's come before this holy God who through Jesus Christ has made it possible for you to enter the presence of God and survive and thrive and prosper. You can know God. There's a reason why you're breathing. God's kept you alive so that you can do what he's called you to do in this world, so you can know God and enjoy him forever. Let's worship him. Let's worship him, shall we?
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day.